Hello, everyone. Welcome. We're going to wait just like one more minute to let the rest of the moms trickle in, and then we'll get started. Okay. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. My name is Victoria Tippins, and I am a childbirth educator and birth attendant. I've been attending births for 15 years as a doula and student midwife. And throughout my time attending births and trainings, furthering my education, student midwifery, I've learned a lot about what really supports normal physiology, how we can optimize space in the pelvis for smooth pushing phases, and evidence-based ways to reduce the risk for tears. So I could talk about all of these topics for hours and hours and hours today. I'm going to summarize as much as I can in the hour that I have with you, specifically focusing on pushing, things you can do to optimize your pushing phase to help reduce time, positions you can get in to help to create more space in the pelvis to support baby and having the space that they need to do the moves that they need to do to go through the pelvis. And we'll also touch on some ways that you can reduce the risk for tears. I'm trying something new with my camera. I'm going to record on an extra video because Zoom recording doesn't look as good compared to my camera. It's just a little fuzzy in quality. So I'll just be looking up at the camera, which is a little above. So that's why I'm looking up because when I post this later, I'll post it from the camera. So it's just better quality for the moms who want to watch it later. And if you are not muted, if you don't mind muting yourself, I appreciate that so that we don't have any like background noise kind of popping up. At the end of our training, I'll open up some time to answer questions. But also, if at any point as I'm talking, please feel free to just drop in the chat that you have like any kind of question, and I'll do my best to get to it. If not now, we can circle back to it later. So without further ado, let's talk about pushing. We're going to talk about pushing for an epidural and a normal physiologic birth, unmedicated, so you understand different ways that you can push no matter what path you take for your birth. So, okay, to introduce pushing, I first want to talk about specifically the difference between directed pushing and normal physiologic intuitive pushing. Let's talk about directed pushing first. So, directed pushing basically means that we are guiding you on how to push, instructing you on how to push. This is very common. It's what you see in the movies, right? Like when we watch a movie when someone's giving birth, I laugh because those scenes are so super duper ridiculous, but they have shaped our collective understanding of what birth is. It's really interesting. And we have research on this. We are told to believe that birth is something that you can't do without a whole lot of outside support and instruction. And that's bullshit. And that's the first thing that I want to bring to your attention. It's total BS that you need all this intervention, all this stuff outside of yourself in order to know how to push your baby out. Your body already knows how to push your baby out. And through thousands of years of evolution, birth has been perfected and perfected and perfected. It doesn't really make sense to think that now suddenly from like the early 1900s on, we need all this intervention and outside instruction when our ancestors were doing this, right, for thousands of years before. And of course, there is a time when we do need intervention, and there is a time when some people need guidance and support, and sometimes directed pushing feels like a good choice for certain moms. So I don't want to make anyone feel like I'm trying to get them to do one thing or the other thing because I could not care at all what choice you make. What I care about is that you feel confident and educated and informed in the choices that you make. So you're making your own informed choices in alignment with your values, in alignment with your preferences and what feels best for your birth, instead of just going along the conveyor belt model of care where we do whatever we're told the whole time, not really realizing that you can make a different choice, or perhaps there's a choice that would feel better for you, if that makes sense. So, with directed pushing, what normally happens is not always we're instructed to be on our back, but that is quite common. 95% of moms in the US give birth on their back. Which is like horrifying because we know that birthing on your back really is not optimal, but that is a very common practice. So sometimes directed pushing starts with, okay, you're 10 centimeters, one, or it starts with, looks like you're spontaneously pushing, or maybe the mom has an epidural. Pardon me, I have seasonal allergies. A mom has an epidural, and then she says, I'm feeling a lot of pressure. Can you check? Because even with an epidural, like you won't feel the pain of the contractions most of the time, but you'll still feel pressure. So often moms will say, like when they're ready and the baby starts to come down, they'll be like, I feel pressure. Can you see what's going on? And maybe the nurse will check and be like, oh my gosh, I see the baby's head. And like everyone comes in, and then you start pushing. So there's a few different ways pushing can begin. In a directed pushing model, the provider will come in and say, okay, Sarah, yeah, I see you're ready to push. Go ahead and get on your back. Let's pull your legs back as far as we can. And then on the next contraction, I want you to hold your breath, bear it down, like bring your chin to your chest and engage your tummy muscles and push as hard as you can, like you're having a big poop. That's how we tell moms to push often. Obviously, every provider is different. Obviously, there's variation, and there are some providers whose directed pushing is a little bit more like gentle guidance. Where they're not being as instructive. They're kind of guiding you to listen to your body. They're guiding you to go a little slower. And there are other providers that are like, push, as hard as you can. So it's very common for moms to be in this directed pushing experience and to feel like, oh my gosh, all these things are happening to me without like really feeling like you have a lot of control. Maybe you feel scared because people are like yelling in your face to push, and you are like, okay, I'll push, and you're worried that something's wrong with your baby. And then later, maybe they'll say, if you say, like, was something wrong? They might say, oh, everything was good. And you're like, well, then why were you yelling at me the whole time? So there are lots of different ways that directed pushing can unfold. I'm going to show you, like, one of the risks specifically to being on your back with your legs all the way back. So you don't have to be on your back for directed pushing, and you also don't have to have your legs all the way back for directed pushing. But this is common, so I want to illustrate to you so you understand. So if you were on your back, with your legs pulled all the way back, what that's doing is it's creating tension on the perineum. So if you can imagine, there is a chain of muscles along the back of your legs from your calves all the way to your pelvic floor, all the way to your perineum. Everything is connected. And so when you stretch your legs really far back like that, what that does is it creates tension on the perineum. And when we create tension on the perineum before the baby even comes out, there's already so much, like the perineum only has so much capacity to stretch before it tears. So some of that capacity is already used up. And then the baby comes down, and here comes baby's head all the way to the part that's, I don't have three hands, but if you can imagine, all the way to the part that's already kind of tense, and that's going to make it stretch even more. And that increases the risk for tearing. So if we are on our back, which I highly recommend you are not, the only reason that you should be on your back is if it makes you feel the most comfortable. If that position is the most comfortable for you, then that's the reason to do it. Otherwise, there's no other reason to do it. Unless there's a medical reason. A medical reason for being on your back would be if you truly needed forceps or vacuum, which are instrumental deliveries. Forceps look like salad tongs. They go along the sides of baby's head and they can pull. And then vacuum is it's a vacuum. It's like a little suction cup that goes on top of baby's head and it can pull that way. Forceps can adjust baby's position. Vacuum cannot. Both come with risks for bruising, swelling, hematoma, very, very, very rare. There are risks to brain damage and skull fractures, but that's very rare. So if perhaps baby's heart rate suddenly declines, and let's say baby's heart rate declines and you're in an upright position, if you're on your back, baby's heart rate might be declining because you're on your back. Birthing in an upright position decreases your risk for a C-section because there's a blood vessel that runs under your uterus. So when the baby is lying on your belly, and they're putting pressure, right? Well, that pressure is going to put pressure on that blood vessel, which can impact oxygen to you and your baby. So, usually, if I was present at a birth, if there was a heart tone concern, and the mom was on their back, though I haven't been to many births with the moms on their back because I'm really as a doula and birth worker, like let's get you upright, let's get you on your side, you know. But if that were to happen, maybe getting in hands and knees, even with an epidural or getting upright, is something that we could do to try to resolve that. And if baby's heart rate is still not looking really great, and you're pushing and baby's close to being born, you could talk about with your provider doing forceps or vacuum as an alternative to a C-section. And there are obviously risks and benefits to each side. But that is an option that you can talk about, or more position changes. So anyway, kind of going back to what I was talking about before, being on your back with the legs all the way back really does increase the risk for a C-section. So, not C-section, sorry, for tearing and C-section, but tearing is specifically. So, what you could do if you were on your back, is to have your legs be relaxed. So instead of like spread all the way wide open, you could lie on your back and just have your legs open gently, if you want to. And once again, the only reason we need to be in this position is if it's most comfortable for you, or there's a medical reason to be on your back, meaning baby's heart rate is going down. So we decided to do forceps and vacuum. We need to be on our back for that. So that's all I can think of. Maybe I'll say there's one other reason, which would be if baby's head comes out, and this is called shoulders dystocia. Ignore this little, my kids got my baby doll with a pen, so here we are. Imagine that the baby's head comes out and then it doesn't rotate. It's supposed to rotate like this. So either way, baby's head will turn. So let's say that doesn't happen, the head comes out and it's really tight, like maybe the head only comes out to here. It doesn't come all the way out, it's just coming out to the nose. There are other signs. There's something called turtle sign, things that providers can look for. And if they see that the baby is not turning, is not coming out all the way, if a minute goes by after the head comes out and a minute goes by and then the baby doesn't come, those are reasons to step in and resolve a shoulder dystocia, meaning the shoulders get stuck. You can safely be provider hands off or hands poised, which just means that if the provider is right there and they notice these signs, they step in. But your provider doesn't have to be hands on immediately to prevent this, just so you know. You can be hands off and have them step in if they see these signs. Typically in the midwifery model, if they see these signs, they'll have mom get upright and get into a lunge or hands and knees. Often OBs will have you get on your back and bring your legs all the way back and have you flat on your back. This is called Mike Roberts. This position specifically opens the pelvis in a way that's supportive to like getting one of the shoulders to like kind of fold forward and delivering one of the baby's arms to help to get them out, basically, if the shoulders get stuck. So maybe on a rare circumstance, being on your back for a shoulder dystocia issue is something that you could do. Being on your back is definitely not a way to prevent shoulder dystocia at all. I would argue that being upright is more supportive because we know that pelvic outlet is smaller when you're on your back. But if there is a shoulder dystocia, that is one way we can resolve it. So that's the only other reason why we would be on our back. So now that you all are thoroughly well versed in my opinion on you being on your back during delivery, let's talk about the other aspects of directed pushing. So the other thing that they'll have you do in addition to getting in a specific position, which I highly recommend you just stay in whatever position it feels best for you, and declining that would just be like, hey, I want you to get on your back, and you would just say, oh no, I'm staying here. And they might say, well, it's policy, you have to get on your back. And you can just say, I said no, right? Just simple. So in addition to that, the coach pushing looks like this. Typically, they'll have you take a deep breath, bring your chin to your chest, and hold your breath and then push like you're having a big poop, right, for the count of 10. And so sometimes this can be really gentle, and providers are saying, okay, you can do this. Like I see babies like getting even closer with every push, keep going, like this kind of gentle encouragement. And other times it's like two nurses hovering over you, people standing over you. The provider's hands are in your vagina, and the nurses are like, push to the count of 10, and like hold your breath. And then they'll say, okay, one, two, three, four. And they're like counting. And then they're like, okay, do it again, do it again. And you're like, right. So you're like kind of like taking a deep breath, and then you have to do it again. So in that approach, you're not breathing very much. And when you're not breathing and you're not getting oxygen, chances are your baby is not really getting great oxygen. So it's ideal to breathe when we're pushing. And this is one argument I have against directed pushing routinely for everyone. Not saying that's not the right choice for you, because maybe it is, but doing it routinely for everybody shows that it has more harm than good. And that's one of the reasons why, is because we're having moms hold their breath so much. It's hard work to hold your breath and push really hard during the metabolic output of a marathon, right? Like going through birth, you're burning a lot of energy. You're going through something physiologically that's very intense, and you need oxygen. You need to breathe. And so, yeah, that's something to consider too when you're considering directed pushing. Another thing with directed pushing is that it does increase the risk for tearing because we're adding extra force. So, when the baby comes down, they go through this normal 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back process. Every once in a while, there'll be someone who has a baby really quick and has a really short pushing phase. For example, one of my mamas in my coaching program yesterday or 2 days ago, she had her baby, and I went on call for her just to give her support if she needed. And she texted me and said, I think I'm going into labor. We're going to head to the hospital. And then she texted me like, I don't know, 40 minutes later or something. And she said, baby is here. They were born in 22 minutes from the time I got to the hospital. I was like, oh my gosh, so she didn't really go through a 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, pushing her baby. Like when she was ready to push, her baby came out very quickly. But that can happen every once in a while, especially in a subsequent pregnancy. You could have a shorter pushing phase. But most of the time, what happens is that the baby kind of gets closer, and then they kind of back up, and then get closer, and then they back up, and then closer. So what they're doing is they're stretching the tissues a little bit more and close, and a little bit more and close, and a little bit more and close. And what that's doing is it's your body's normal biological process to protect your perineum. 66% of moms in the United States give birth and tear, which is insane. It's absolutely insane that so many people tear while giving birth, and that is not the fault of our bodies. That is the result of the evidence practice gap of addressing pushing in a model of care that's really antithetical to what best supports protecting your perineum. So having you be on your back, doing directed pushing where we're having you push as hard as you can, that skips over that normal 2 steps forward, 1 step back process. Because if you're adding all this force and pushing as hard as you can, your baby wants to kind of go like slow, 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 so the tissues can like slowly open. And instead, they go a lot, like they'll go a little bit faster from that. That's really like special, and maybe special isn't the right word, but this really critical, like important time when we want to really allow those tissues to stretch, because that is what's going to protect you from tearing. And this is what I like to tell my moms. A lot of people think, and they watch social media, and they think like, okay, if I just birth in this position, if I use the warm compress, then I'm not going to tear. And like, yeah, it's very possible that the position in the warm compress will help you. That is evidence-based. But it doesn't matter if you are in the right position, if you're not doing directed pushing, if you're using the warm compress, if you did perineal massage in your pregnancy, like all of that is great, but it's not going to matter that much if in that moment, when you feel the pressure of baby's head coming down, you go, either you're doing directed pushing or you emotionally aren't prepared. So you go, oh my God, I'm going to add extra force and like, and bear down and get the baby out faster. That increases the risk for tearing. So what I like to support my moms with in my coaching program for everyone in the program is to really explore what are the emotional preparation tools that are going to help you feel safe in the presence of pressure. And this is a personalized approach, so I can give general information to all of you, and I will, and I'll give you more in the rest of this training. But getting that personalized support with understanding for you specifically, what are the things that is going to help you feel safe in the presence of pressure. And I have frameworks for exactly what to do. And with my first I tore because I had been a doula for 9 years and I had all this knowledge, and all that knowledge was great. And it helped me all the way up until pushing. But when I got to that point where I felt the head come down and my baby was getting close to crowning, I freaked out because all like my thinking brain turned off, where our thinking brain turns off in labor. And so all of my knowledge went away, and it didn't matter because I didn't have the emotional preparation and I didn't have the integration of that knowledge, meaning I practiced building positive associations to the feeling of pressure, exploring my fears and working with them and building relationships with them and having a plan for how to help me slow down in the presence of that moment, right? I didn't have any of that stuff. So I freaked out and I had no idea what to do. So I just said, I'm going to tear, I'm going to tear, I'm going to tear. And I literally gave birth to my baby, like chanting that. And then I tore. So, because I just, yeah, I freaked out. But with my second, after working at a midwifery center as a student midwife and teaching the classes, everyone joked that I would never get to learn how to repair a tear because no one ever tore. It was really funny. And it was true. Like, very rarely did anyone tear because they were getting really good comprehensive birth education from me, and because they were using different evidence-based techniques and approaches for supporting pushing that was way more evidence-based and really reduce the risk for tearing. So with my second pregnancy, I took everything I learned from that birth center and then I just created my own tools to help me with the problem. Like, what was the problem last time? Oh, I forgot to slow down because I was scared. So this time I'm going to create a plan around that and build emotional support and preparation around that. And I created tools and I practiced tools because there's a difference between knowing something and integrating something. So I did that integration. And then when I felt my second baby come out, not only did I not tear, but I didn't even feel pain. I did not feel burning. Same with my third, no pain. It was just pressure. And it was almost orgasmic. Like, I feel like after having three babies, like, I don't know if I want to go through birth again anytime soon, but I just had a baby like not too long ago. But I could go through pushing again. It was a really cool experience. It was very cool. So, um, pushing is not inherently painful, and tearing is not, also, it's not inherent to birth. There are a lot of ways to reduce your risk for tearing. And the approach that I recommend that all of you take is to consider how you want to approach pushing, number one, and we're going to go deeper into that some more in this training. How do we want to approach pushing? Because that impacts your risk for tearing. And then the physical preparation that you do and the emotional preparation that you do, and then learning evidence-based tools to help you in that moment to really reduce your risk of tearing. So we want to combine all of these things instead of just like, I want the warm compress. It's really a combination of approach, emotional and physical preparation, and then evidence-based ways to reduce the risk for tearing. And that is why 91% of the moms in my coaching program do not tear, because we do all these things, but we do it in a personalized way, and we're making sure there's accountability and supporting you. If you're like, that didn't really feel good or that didn't work for me, then let's try something else, right? So yeah. Okay, let's go into next. Let's see if there's anything else about directed pushing I want to share. I feel like I covered it pretty well. So let's talk about spontaneous pushing next. So let's talk about this in the context of a spontaneous unmedicated birth. So we're not talking about an epidural, but I will get into an epidural soon. So in an unmedicated birth, if you're wanting to do spontaneous pushing, you could do directed or spontaneous, either way. What that looks like is first considering laboring down if you want to. So if you start to feel the urge to push, then it means you're ready to push, right? But if someone checked you and said you're 10 centimeters, I think that it's time for you to push, and then they want to start kind of getting you to, do those things. You could do something called laboring down, and this does apply to an epidural as well, but I'll talk about that in the epidural context a little bit later. So laboring down means that we wait a little bit, and it could be 10 or 20 minutes. It could even be 1 to 2 hours after your 10 centimeters, just to see if your body starts to spontaneously push on its own to give the baby a chance to get a little lower in the pelvis because you could be 10 centimeters, but your baby might not be low enough to come out yet or for you to be ready to push. So we need to both be open enough and your baby needs to be low enough to stimulate. Um, the fetal ejection reflex. So just because you're confirmed to be 10 centimeters, but you don't feel the urge to push yet, doesn't mean something's wrong, and it doesn't mean you have to do directed pushing. If you want to do directed pushing, you can. You could also do some gentle guidance, which would mean that the provider would be more gently kind of encouraging you to do some things to bring baby down. And what that would look like would be like getting in whatever position feels comfortable for you, trying different positions, maybe trying different lunges, opening your legs in a different way to help the baby come down, using gravity on your side, sitting on the toilet. We have a normal pelvic floor release response on the toilet, a birth stool. Hospitals they have something called a cub, which is a C-shaped inflatable seat, which is kind of similar. So getting upright is something you can try. And having people also like maybe massage your legs or jiggle your legs, it's called the jiggle, to release tension in the body. That can be helpful too. So there's lots of things you can try. And then maybe with the gentle guidance, they would say something like, on the next contraction, just take a big deep breath and just engage your tummy muscles and push down for a few seconds. And we're kind of more like mimicking spontaneous pushing instead of doing that for 10 seconds and then doing it again. Just trying it and exploring it and see how that feels. And as long as your baby is doing well, then we don't need to do directed pushing. If your baby isn't doing well, it might be good to try some things to take more of an aggressive approach to try to get baby out. But if baby isn't doing well, being on your back is probably not going to help. Being upright will probably help more. So that's a little bit of information about laboring down. One of the benefits of spontaneous pushing is that you're less likely to get exhausted and laboring down as well. If you start pushing immediately, you can increase the risk of you getting exhausted, and also your labor time begins, right? Your pushing time begins. And there is a clock. There isn't really a set rule around how long anyone can push specifically, unless if you're an out of hospital midwife, there's probably rules around your license. I remember as a student, the rule was 3 or 4 hours. But in the hospital, there isn't really a set time. If you are pushing for 3 hours or more, probably there is a positioning issue. Some providers won't be very supportive for you pushing for longer. And this is one of the reasons why it is evidence-based to reduce your risk for a C-section to decline the 32-week growth ultrasound. And I'm not telling anyone to decline this ultrasound. I'm just saying that I'm illustrating the research. It's well researched that declining that ultrasound and avoiding big baby bias does decrease your risk for C-section, because I know a mom who got the ultrasound, was told her baby was really big, pushed for a little while, I don't know how long, but then they looked at her chart and said, your baby's really big. The reason why you're pushing for so long is because your baby just isn't fitting. So we need to give you a C-section. And she got a C-section, and her baby was 7 pounds. So it was not that her baby was big. And it's possible that C-section was unnecessary. That mom had the option to get in other positions, to maybe consider forceps or vacuum, to try for a vaginal birth, or just have more time. And those options were not presented to her because of big baby bias. So that is something that can pop up. But yeah, kind of going back to the benefits of spontaneous pushing, it's less exhausting. And it's more, you and your baby will get more oxygen right throughout birth, which I think is why it's less exhausting, because you're breathing more. Moms tend to feel like they have more positive experiences, supported in birthing in upright positions, letting their bodies guide the way. And for someone who wants to have that experience, that can feel really supportive. It does also decrease the risk for tearing. So birthing with a spontaneous push, what that looks like is that you'll probably experience something called the fetal ejection reflex. Not everyone experiences the fetal ejection reflex, but most people do in a spontaneous pushing phase. So what that looks like is there are actually two reflexes for you to be aware of. Imagine my hand is the back of the vaginal wall. as the baby comes down into the vagina, they're going to put some pressure on a pressure point in the back of the vaginal wall, and that is called the Ferguson reflex. Just another thing that was discovered by a man over 100 years ago and decided to attach his name to it, which is garbage, but unfortunately, almost everything in obstetrics is named after men. So we'll move on from that. I'm sure you all can guess what my opinion is on that. So the Ferguson reflex means that basically your body releases more oxytocin in spurts to get you to have your contractions closer together and initiate the pushing phase. The what is it called? The fetal ejection reflex is a reflex that your body naturally does to spontaneously push in the presence of the pressure of your baby coming down. So just like blinking or throwing up or something that you do, sneezing, right? Like without any kind of outside control, your body just does it. And that is what the fetal ejection reflex is. And it's very, very cool. And I've experienced it in all three of my births. And I'm really grateful I got to experience it because it was very cool. It was very empowering. And pushing was one of my favorite parts. And often moms tell me that pushing is one of their favorite parts of birth. And I know a lot of moms who have said that the fetal ejection reflex, like when they let that process take over, they didn't feel pain. They felt really empowered. I just interviewed a mom on my podcast. It's called the Peaceful Birth Podcast. And she said it didn't hurt. And it was so cool to feel a human coming through you, and it didn't hurt. It was a really sweet interview. Her name is Savannah, if you wanted to listen to her story. Yeah, so in the fetal ejection reflex, what will happen is that probably you'll go through transition, and transition is that period of time between active labor and pushing, where we're getting near pushing. And sometimes that transition is easy for people because sometimes the body releases some adrenaline, and that might make your oxytocin reduce a little bit to make your contraction slow down, and you might just take a little nap and wake up and feel like the urge to push. Or you might have a more difficulty like throwing up, shakiness, nausea, doubt. That is all common with transition. It's typically very, very short, only like 10 minutes or so. So you'll get through transition, and maybe you go through a part where you're like, oh, I'm starting to face self-doubt. I don't know if I can do it anymore. And then all of a sudden your body goes, huh. It spontaneously pushes, and then you're like, oh, I'm pushing. And that's a very cool part of birth. That's very common to feel like we face our own self-doubt because we have never done this before, and you don't know how to give birth. Like, I mean, your body knows how to give birth, but you don't know you can do it in your confidence quite yet. Even if you think you do, you might get there and be like, wait, can I do this? But then you do it. And that's what's so empowering about birth. We walk away from it connected to and awakened to the power that is already inside of you. It's very cool. And you having the education and support in that moment to support you in going through that unmedicated, if that's what you want to do, is a gift that you'll carry for the rest of your life. If like someone believed in you in the moments that you weren't believing in yourself. So it's a way for you and your partner or support people to feel even closer together, if that makes sense. So you'll get through transition, and then you'll feel probably like, your body will just kind of start bearing down spontaneously. And for some moms, they'll kind of do this. They'll hold their breath and they'll go like, like that. Other moms will go, you know, yeah. And so there are lots of different ways that it could be. I think I was more grunty. I was like, like that. And so we tend to make sound. That's very common. And the best way to get your baby out naturally is to do whatever comes naturally for you. So if you feel like in a unmedicated birth, you get the fetal ejection reflex and you just like want to make these sounds and like bear down, just allow that process to happen. I would compare it to, it's not easy to compare it to anything really, but I don't know, have you ever like, thrown up? It's kind of like your body just does it and you can't control it. It's kind of like that. Or maybe if you were a little constipated and you were trying to pass that, and then maybe you're sitting on the toilet and your body just kind of like it kind of spontaneously contracts your tummy muscles to try to push that out. I would say like that's probably as close to the fetal ejection reflex that I could describe. So if you get the fetal ejection reflex, it is really ideal for you to just relax into it. So I would like to open your mind to this approach for pushing that is much different than what we're told in the movies, where we have to like bear down with all of our might and like push as hard as we can. And I don't want to minimize other people's experience because there are definitely times where we do have to work harder to get our baby out. But most of the time, especially in an unmedicated birth, the body's physiologic reflex will kick in and your body will spontaneously push. And so when that happens, instead of like adding extra force, what you could do is relax. And that's it. Really, your job in birth from beginning to end is to relax. Throughout active labor in an unmedicated birth, you would be doing your rhythm, repeating the rhythm, and relaxing in between. So you're just going to cope with a contraction and relax, cope with a contraction and relax, and that's your job. When you get to pushing, then you are going to let the reflex happen and then relax. So that's pretty much all we're doing. It makes it very, very simple. If you can focus on, I drop my jaw, I'm relaxing my shoulders, and when the reflex comes, I let it come and my body goes, huh, or whatever it does. And then when the reflex goes away, I go, oh, and I like take a deep breath and I relax my shoulders and I wait and I just stay in this whatever position I'm in. I take my deep breaths, I take my rest, and then the contraction comes, the reflex comes, and then I push. And pushing during a contraction is more like spurts, like I mentioned before. Like you might go like, ugh, and then another one comes, right? And you do that however many times until the contraction is over. Instead of like with the reflex going with your breath, like holding your breath for like 10 seconds, and then taking a few deep breaths and doing it again. So it's a little bit different. Yeah, that's the fetal ejection reflex in a nutshell. Let's go back to talking about an epidural now and talking about laboring down with an epidural. So, if you're ready to push with an epidural, there are a couple different ways we can identify that. Like I mentioned at the beginning of this training, one would be you feel pressure and someone checks you and they see that you're ready, or there's a routine exam that happens and they say, oh, you're like 9.5. They might say you're 9 and a lip, which means a lip of cervix is like a thin band of tissue that's left that's about to hopefully dissolve out of the way. Or they check you and say you're 10. If you're 9 and a lip, they'll probably say, okay, it's soon, like we'll start kind of prepping things and we'll check again. I do want to mention if your water is broken, you have 5 cervical exams before really significantly increasing the risk for infection. So if we're like going to check you at 9 and then we want to check you again and then maybe you got checked a whole bunch, it is a reason to consider reducing routine exams and just getting them if needed. Because with an epidural, if you don't feel the pressure, but we're thinking we're in a pushing phase, like it might be good to check and know what's going on. We want to make sure we have some of those 5 available to use without really increasing the risk for infection if there is actually a good reason to do an exam. So just wanted to share that. And so what would happen is the provider would probably come in and say, okay, like let's start pushing. And if you had made it clear beforehand you want to do a different kind of pushing, if you have support people who can advocate for that, then hopefully you don't just go into the like, you get on your back, pull your legs back, and we're going to do things this way. And if it's a new provider you haven't met or whatever, that would be the moment to say, we want to try doing this for pushing. You could also bring your birth plan that can illustrate this. I have birth plan building workshops on once a month on Mondays. Just go to the calendar tab in school and you'll see that, and you can pop in on the workshop if you want to. We can talk about the language to use. But yeah, you could, let's see, yeah, you would probably have on the birth plan, you want to do this, and then you could give that to the nurse. And so hopefully the nurse can be supportive. If your nurse isn't really supportive of your birth plan, I would get a new nurse. So you aren't like, yeah, birthing with a nurse that you don't feel is really supporting what it is that you want. So options for epidural would be, first I'll say actually that fetal ejection reflex doesn't always happen with an epidural. Sometimes it can. Your body is still going through birth, even though you are not feeling all of the things. And so it's very, I won't say it's common, but it does happen that someone suddenly says, I feel a lot of pressure with an epidural. And like someone will call the nurse, the doula will get the nurse, and the nurse will come in and be like, oh my gosh, the baby's coming out. So your body can have the baby without doing all that pushing, even with an epidural. And sometimes that reflex doesn't really kick in, and doing a little bit of gentle guidance or a little bit of directed pushing can be needed with an epidural. So epidurals definitely do increase the need for doing directed pushing, but you can do it in a different way. So something that you could do is get into alternative positions instead of just doing being on your back. If you were to be on your back, having your legs just open gently instead of pulled all the way back would be better for protecting your perineum. But it would be ideal if you're not. So you could be on your side and pushing on your side. So you'd probably have someone just holding your leg open. They don't have to stretch it all the way this way. Just open it. We don't have to like do that. Just open it. I have seen like videos on Instagram and been like surprised by how close the mom's legs were and how the baby still came out. Really, like we don't have to like open your leg really far. So if someone just holding your leg open, you can push on one side for 15 minutes, go to the other side, push on that side for 15 minutes. Pushing in a hands and knees position is really ideal with an epidural because in hands and knees, we are using gravity, we're opening the pelvic outlet, and there is a lot of possibility for variation. So I have a mom in my coaching program who also had her baby. Both these moms had their babies in the same day a couple days ago. And she texted me. I could find the text, but I'm on Instagram Live right now on my phone. But she had said something like, um, we got close to a C-section and I opened my phone to see a picture of her and her baby and I saw the word C-section. I was like, oh, she had a C-section. And then I read it more and it said, we almost had a C-section because we were worried about baby's heart rate, and she did have an epidural. But we used your formula, which I'll go over with you all right now, to help to like get baby in different positions because the baby switched to OP, meaning the baby was like this and engaged in the pelvis. And then during transition, instead of turning back, the baby decided to turn and face the front and try to come out that way. So she used my formula to help open the space in the pelvis with an epidural to get the baby and to move back. And the baby did move back into anterior. And the baby could have come out posterior, but it was making it a little trickier. And so we got the baby to move, or she did, with the knowledge she gained, which was really cool. So I teach a lot more about in my coaching program. If baby's up high, this is what you do with or without an epidural. If they say that baby's leaning to the side, if they say baby's asynclitic, if they say baby's face is appearing instead of their head, there are all these things that can happen. This is what you do. And so I'll teach you this one specifically. So what you want to do with an epidural is get on hands and knees, lift one leg up and push like that. And then do that for 5 minutes and bring that leg down. You'll need someone else to lift your leg up. Lift the other leg up and push like that for 5 minutes and then bring that leg down. Then bring your knees towards each other and your feet out. And that's called internal rotation. Internal rotation is going to open the pelvic outlet, which is this circle, the outer circle of the pelvis, where this pelvis isn't super flexible, but if we open this circle, that can help create more space for the baby to come out. Push like that for 5 minutes and then go into neutral. And so she did some specific things that I taught for turning baby from posterior to anterior. And then she did this, and this is what got the baby to descend and come out. And she had a vaginal birth, which was really awesome. With an epidural, or not without an epidural too, like either way, it's kind of hard to hold your body up for a really long time in hands and knees. So what you could do if you're in the hospital, or if you're not in the hospital, if you're at home or at a birth center, you could just get on the floor and lean over the bed or lean over a couch or something. I labored for a lot of my labor at home with my second, just on my knees on the floor and leaning over my couch. So if you're at the hospital, you could bring the hospital bed down like this. So your knees are here and then your upper body is here. So you're leaning forward over it and that holds your upper body. You can have a peanut ball, you could have pillows that you're like leaning over and that just holds your upper body so you can be in that position a lot longer. So with an epidural with pushing, you can be in side to side, you can be in hands and knees, you could also be in a squatting position too. Squatting does increase the risk for tearing, so it's important to be aware of that. So if you want to push in a squatting position, you could get the squat bar in the hospital bed and you could hold on to it and push like that. But if we start to see the head is really starting to emerge and getting closer, it might be ideal just to like have support with sitting back and lying back in, and not on your back, but in a side lying position, because that's going to be more protective for your perineum if you're in that position. And using a warm compress is another thing that you can do, especially with an epidural where you don't have as much feeling. You will feel pressure, but you won't feel as much. And maybe you're doing a little bit more coach pushing. It can be a little harder to like honor that two steps forward, one step back, like slow process. So it's even more important then to use a warm compress to protect the perineum. So that is a little talk about epidurals. To close that off, I will say that laboring down is also an option with an epidural. So you could do laboring down with an epidural or in a natural birth. And that means that, like I mentioned before, we check and see if the baby's ready. And then we either encourage you to, or sorry, either we, yeah, encourage you to start pushing, or with laboring down, we wait a little bit and see if you can get the baby down a little lower and start feeling that pressure before you start pushing, for example, with the epidural. Laboring down, I did write this little statistic. It reduces pushing time by 27 minutes, which is cool. It does not impact your cesarean risk or the rate of having a vaginal birth. So if you labor down, it's not going to increase the need for a cesarean. It doesn't have any impact on cesarean risk or rates, but it does decrease the pushing time by about 27 minutes. And you'll spend that pushing time waiting to relaxing and laboring, right? And waiting to push instead of actually pushing, which means that it'll reduce the risk for you being exhausted. So that's a little bit on laboring down. Let's go to positions for an unmedicated birth next, kind of flip flop in between the two. With an unmedicated birth, and with positions, there are lots of different positions you can choose, and ultimately the best one is going to be the best one for you. So whatever feels good for you. And it's important to do some good preparation work beforehand. I have a specific formula that you can do throughout your pregnancy, especially at the end of pregnancy, to support your baby in being in optimal alignment to help to have them be like, I guess I'll say avoid positioning issues is a good way to put it, or reduce the risk for a positioning issue. So I'll close this talk by talking about that. But before I get into that, I'll just cover some positions, and then I see I got a comment, so I'll check on that in just a second. So you could do hands and knees. You could do sitting. Like I mentioned before, sitting on the cub or the toilet. You could also, if you're in the shower, and you feel like you want to push, you could push in the shower if someone wants to come in and like catch the baby if you're standing. That can happen. Sometimes in a hospital, moms feel like they want to stand, and so they'll feel comfortable standing and leaning over the hospital bed, which is why the hospital bed is so great, because you can like move it up. So you can move it up to the right height for you, and then you can like lean over it or push your hands into it, and you can push standing up if you want. You can also push side to side, like on your side, or squatting. Squatting and sitting increases the risk for tears. Lying on your side, hands and knees, and standing reduce the risk for tears the most. But ultimately, it's important to be in the position that feels best for you. I'm looking at this comment. Some Mexican midwives I've met before suggest trying different birthing positions during your period, as the position where your blood descends is the one that your pelvis opens the most. What? This is why I love midwives, because they have all these really cool like tricks. Does this hold water? What do you mean, does this hold water? Maybe you can like let me know what that means, because I'm not exactly sure what that means, but yeah, and I'll check what you want to say about that and answer. But that's really interesting. Oh, does this sound viable? Okay. Does this hold water? That's an expression, but I apparently didn't know that. I would say that I really trust midwives, and I trust indigenous traditions and traditional traditions. Like if you were to look at the history where we use traditional traditions to support birth, like for example, there are some Black granny midwives from the South who delivered over 3,000 babies, like multiple of thousands of babies without losing a single mother. And they do that through tradition, right? Like they've learned these traditions that have been passed down through generations of midwives to help promote safety for mothers and babies. So I trust tradition, and I think that's very interesting. If I want a water birth, should I push on land instead of the water? What would reduce the risk for tearing more? That's a great question. I just did a whole training on water birth and hydrotherapy, and it's in school. So you can just scroll down in you can look at my live trainings. I haven't popped in there, but I can. But just like scroll through the community or scroll on the live trainings tab under the like feed, and you'll see it. I just posted it a few days ago. Okay, so to finish up, well, offer questions in a moment, but before that, I just wanted to talk a little bit about some preparation work. Like I mentioned before, I teach a formula to reduce the risk for a positioning issue, and that can make pushing easier. And so I can't really get into that too much. And this is something I often reserve more for the moms in my coaching program. And it's a very personalized approach that I like to take. So you're not like learning all this alone, but you're learning it with someone who can check in with you and give you ongoing support around it. I do make my spinning babies lesson free in the free birth class. So you can go in there and just look for the spinning babies lesson. And on that lesson, that is one of the many things that I offer in the whole package of the right kind of preparation you can do. That's one that everyone should do. And it can be really helpful. It is an evidence-based way to reduce your risk for C-section, to do the spinning babies to support optimizing space in your pelvis. And that can help lead to a smoother and faster pushing phase and also a smoother and easier labor because positioning issues can increase the risk for longer labors and more pain. If you want to learn more about how you can embrace birth feeling really confident and prepared and get more personalized support, I invite you to, I'm just going to drop in the chat just to book a call with me. And it's a free birth breakthrough call. And I see one of my moms that just joined us in here. So we did a call and we talked about, um, we'll talk about like you and what it is that you want for your birth and what you'll walk away from, whether you want to do my coaching program or not, either way, you'll walk away with a plan on exactly what you need to do to feel confident and prepared. A lot of the times, moms, it's like, we want to feel confident and prepared, but we don't know what we don't know. So it's really hard to like figure all that stuff out on your own and just understanding like, okay, here are the gaps, right? From someone who can reflect that to you can be really helpful. And then we'll just explore if my coaching program would be a good fit for you, if that's something you think you might want to do. It's so ideal to have someone who can be there to support you every step of the way compared to like being all by yourself figuring stuff out. And information is great, but and I make a lot of it free because I care about everyone having good births. But like I mentioned before with my doula experience, right? Like I had been a doula for 9 years by the time I had my first, and I still tore because I didn't have any support in overcoming my fear or accountability, and I didn't do any integration or preparation. And then even after that, I didn't even know what to do, and I had to create that and test it, with a lot of people. But it's that personalized support that really changes the game. So book a call with me if you want to. And let's just open it up for questions. You're welcome to unmute yourself and ask a question. We have about 5 minutes, or you can drop it in the chat. And if there are no questions, then I'll see you all later. I'll just wait a moment and see if anyone has a question. No? Okay. Well, I hope you all have a beautiful rest of your day. And thanks so much for coming. It was great to have you all. This was a really big training, which was awesome. Oh, no questions, but thank you so much for your time. Oh, you're so sweet. Thank you. Thank you. Aw, thanks so much. Okay, have a beautiful day. Bye.